After a century of war and riots, France was ruled by Louis XIV, the most powerful monarch of his time. In 1572, when the growing conflicts between Catholics and Huguenots finally reached its point, a huge massacre took place on the steps of Paris. This was known as St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. This horrific event sparked a 6-week nationwide slaughter of Huguenots at Catholic hands. So while everyone was basically killing or being killed, this Huguenot prince named Henry managed to survive. Now on to Henry of Navarre. He was a descendant of a long line of medieval kings and nobles, including Louis IX, and was the first Bourbon king to inherit the throne in 1589. Even though he was decently attractive and somewhat acceptable, many Catholics didn't really like Henry. Sensing the hate, he decided to totally give up Protestantism and convert to being a Catholic. He even said, "Paris is well worth a mass." The shade. Even after Henry converted to Catholicism, growing conflicts between Catholics and Huguenots, or French Protestants, still rocked the country. Between 1562 and 1598, Huguenots and Catholics fought 8 religious wars. Chaos spread through France. In 1598, Henry created the Declaration of Religious Tolerance that was called the Edict of Nantes. This said that the Huguenots could live in peace in France and set up their own houses of worship in some cities. Henry of Navarre devoted the rest of his life to rebuilding France, but some people still disagreed and he was stabbed to death while riding in his carriage in 1610. After Henry's death, his son Louis XIII reigned. He was a weak king, but in 1624 he appointed a minister named Cardinal Richelieu to make up for his weaknesses. Cardinal Richelieu was basically the ruler of France. For several years he had been a hard-working leader of the Catholic Church in France. As Louis's minister, he was able to pursue his ambitions in the political arena. He took 2 steps to increase the power of the Bourbon monarchy. First, he moved against the Huguenots. Then, he sought to weaken the nobles' power. He ordered nobles to take down their fortified castles. Richelieu also wanted to make France the strongest state in Europe. The greatest obstacle to this was the Habsburg rulers, whose lands surrounded France. They ruled Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, and parts of the Holy Roman Empire. To limit their power, Richelieu involved France in the 30 Years' War. Meanwhile, many French thinkers had started to turn towards the idea of skepticism. Now, you must be as confused as this guy. But be exactly that, because skepticism is the idea that nothing can ever be known for certain. A French writer named Michel de Montaigne developed a new form of literature, the essay. Now this guy, René Descartes, was a brilliant thinker. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, he examined the skeptical argument that one can never be certain of anything. Richelieu and Henry's efforts to strengthen the French monarchy paved the way for the most powerful ruler in French history, Louis XIV. Louis was only 5 feet 5 inches tall and began his reign when he was only 4 years old. Since Louis was only a child when he became king, the true ruler of France was Richelieu's successor, Cardinal Mazarin, whose greatest triumph came in 1648 with the ending of the 30 Years' War. Mazarin's unfair laws tore France apart. After Mazarin's death in 1661, the 22-year-old Louis took control of the government himself. He weakened the power of the nobles by excluding them from his councils. In contrast, he increased the power of the government agents called intendants, who collected taxes and administered justice. Louis's Minister of Finance, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, believed in the theory of mercantilism. To prevent wealth from leaving the country, he tried to make France self-sufficient. He wanted to be able to manufacture everything it needed instead of relying on imports. Louis also spent a fortune to surround himself with luxury and made the nobles totally dependent on him. Versailles was the center of the arts during Louis's reign. He made opera and ballet more popular. He even danced the title role in the ballet The Sun King. In 1667, Louis invaded the Spanish Netherlands in an effort to expand France's boundaries. He gained 12 towns, and encouraged by his success, he personally led an army into the Dutch Netherlands in 1672. Smaller countries in Europe decided to band together against France a few years later, which resulted in the War of the Spanish Succession. This costly war dragged on until 1714, until the Treaty of Utrecht was signed in that year. Louis's last years were more sad than glorious. Realizing that his wars had ruined France, he regretted the suffering he had brought to his people. He died in bed in 1715.